Okay, cool. All right, hey everybody, I'm Jeremy Druin. I'm a pen tester for a local company here in Louisville, and basically do a lot of web and network pen testing, and then primarily, I guess the value add that I do is I do a lot of remediation. So once I find problems in web applications or networks, systems, operating systems, whatever, work with the developers, work with the administrators of the systems to remediate the problems found. And today I'm going to talk about Mutillidae. It's a web application. It's been written to be deliberately vulnerable, and so it makes a good training environment. So basically you're going to go through what the program is, and then how to install it, configure it, run it, get it working, how to use it, where to get some help. So what is it? It's an actually vulnerable web application. It's a real app. This makes it a little bit different than some training environments where you need to type in like a certain sequence, but it's basically just matching on what you're typing in. It's not actually vulnerable. Those types of systems definitely have advantages. They're not really vulnerable, so you can deploy them a little more safely. This application is definitely vulnerable, and if deployed on a production network or something like that, would definitely be dangerous. So you wouldn't want to do anything like that. But being actually vulnerable lets the developers and the system administrators and the other people that are training try their own way to figure out how to get a vulnerability to work, how to make an exploit work. So it does have that advantage of being realistic. It's free. It's actually a open source project, and like Bob says, the price is right. So currently, as of the release that I'm going to release today, these are the vulnerabilities that are inside. The latest one being the CBC bit flipping attack, and the vulnerabilities are designed to cover the Owasp top 10. So you kind of see those on the top left, and then as time went along, I added some items from SANS Top 25 that had to do with web applications. Not all of the SANS Top 25 is exactly related to web, but a lot of it is. Then we started adding some custom vulnerabilities that come up in different kinds of scans. So if you use like a Burp Suite scanner, or you use Hailstorm, or Web Inspect, or tools like that, they will find different things in applications and flag them as problems. And so a lot of those checks that are done by the tools have been added into the site so that the tools can find them. So a little bit of something there for everybody, I think. To help users use the site, there's a couple different levels of hints. Now by default, there's no hints. The screens are just look like a normal web application. But if you click the toggle hints button, it'll open up level 1 hints. These are the pink hints that you see at the bottom of the screen here. They'll basically get someone started. They'll kind of suggest something to type in, or talk about maybe where you can get some more information, or give you some keywords to Google on. These are disabled in the security level 5, but true to form, there's a way to hack the security disabling to get the hints to turn back on even in level 5. There's a second level of hints that are accompanying with a yellow bar, and these are more like tutorials, or they might even provide the answer and just have you copy and paste it. So the level 2 hints are basically going to explain step by step what you need to do to pull off the exploit on the page. There's 3 security levels right now. There's level 0, the default, 1, and 5, with the remaining numbers left so that later on the project can be expanded to have some security controls that kind of work and kind of don't, and those will end up being those intermediate levels down the road. So the level 0 is meant to be wide open. There may accidentally be a little bit of security in level 0, but it's not intentional. Level 1 will actually increase the security level slightly, as we'll see, and then 5 is supposed to secure it. So, for example, this screenshot was taken from the system, security level 0, and some malicious content was entered into the name field, and then the form was submitted. An error message displays. It's the worst possible kind of error message. It's an error message that not only tells you the error, but it also dumps out the SQL statement that had the error. It tells you what kind of database it's running, etc. So this is a worst case scenario pretty much. When we go to level 1, the system starts to act a little bit different. We injected the exact same content. You can actually still see the single quote in the background. But the message that popped up is some JavaScript validation that explains how it's impossible to get around JavaScript validation, and that basically the attempt's been thwarted. Of course, the challenge would be to get around the JavaScript validation, and you would end up, if you did get around the JavaScript, with the same error message that we saw in the last slide. And then in level 5, we inject the exact same content again, but the site is behaving differently. There's an error, but it's not an error message that tells you what the internal system state is. There's no SQL query that's been dumped out. It's basically a proper error message. The system has acted appropriately. It didn't act on the content that was injected. It didn't interpret it as a command. It just saw it as data. Bad data, the wrong username. There's bubble hints that have been added to the system recently. And the way these work is when the mouse hovers over an area on the screen that has a vulnerability to it, usually like an input field or a button of some kind, someplace that you can interact with, a hint will pop up that matches the security level, or excuse me, the hint level of the system. So by default, hint level 0, you're just going to get a pop-up. In this case, this one's about SQL injection on this particular field on this particular page, and it just tells you that this field might be vulnerable to SQL injection. But as you increase the hint level from 0 to 1, which would be the pink hints that we saw earlier, the bubble hint itself will actually change, and it'll give you a little more information about that particular field. So this is hint level 1, and then if we go to hint level 2, we can see that the bubble hint is actually starting to try to tell you what to do. Now, the tutorials will follow at the bottom of the page. They'll match the bubble hints as well. Recently, I added an enforce SSL feature. Basically, if this button's enabled and you try to browse to the site with HTTP, it'll honor the request, but it'll send back to you a redirect that redirects you up to HTTPS, so that you're supposed to be able to maintain SSL throughout the entire session. If you try to take the S off, it's fine, it'll just redirect you back up again. So the purpose of this addition was to allow people to start to test tools like SSL strip, where you would be able to ARP cache poison the box, get in between the user and the web server, and then intercept those SSL communications and be able to read that content. Basically, the way the SSL strip tool itself works is it actually downgrades the communications. It takes all the S's off of the HTTPS's, turning all the links and redirects and forms back into HTTPs. So this feature supports the ability to test that tool. There's some capture the flag type items already added into Mutillidae. Where this came from is I had noticed that some of the other tools were using one system to have the vulnerabilities, and then they would have to set up a second website that would be the capture website, where you would try to redirect an administrator to capture their credentials or hijack their session. So what I'm doing was adding a capture data page into Mutillidae itself. If you can get someone to visit this page, it'll automatically record their cookie, any post or get parameters that were sent in, write those to a local file. Also, it'll write them down into the database, and it displays them on the page, as can be seen in the red box. So this was added in recently to help people practice getting others to be redirected to the site. In this case, you could be doing a local redirection, but you could also set up 2 copies of Mutillidae, one being basically the victim website, the other's just running on the network just to act as a place to capture redirects. And there's a page to display this information back. So this creates an interesting situation where in one of the capture the flags, I believe what they did is they tried to basically attack the attacker. So they would purposely let themselves get caught being redirected to the capture data page, but they would poison the data that they were sending over to the capture data page, so that when the attacker read the data back on the capture data page, it would execute the script on the attacker. So it's kind of an interesting scenario, clever use of the tool. These pages also honor the security levels, so if you're in security level 5, it should be safe. If you're in 0, take your chances. Another one of the features added recently was automated database setup. It's always had some automation built into it, but that was increased recently because we want to be able to use the tool on as many different systems as possible. And this system works on Linux and Windows and multiple versions of Windows, including Windows 7. So the way it works is when you install the files, you're just dragging and dropping them into a folder. Then there's a button you click to set up the database. And it'll run a script in the background that will attempt to set up the database for you onto the MySQL server. It'll use the username and password that's supplied in the config file. And it'll try to build all the tables for you and build the store procedures and the views and whatever else the database needs. And then it'll go back and it'll put data into the tables for you to get you started. So there'll be some blog entries in there when you start. There'll be some usernames and passwords that you can try to get out of the system. You don't have to type all that in. There's also the same button basically allows you to bail out. So if you hack away on it, put a bunch of cross-site scripts into the database, and now every time you go to every page, there's pop-ups everywhere, and the pages are defaced or whatever, you can just hit reset DB, and it'll restore the database back to the way it was when you started. So a few use cases where this has been used, obviously to practice web pen testing. It's used to practice with a lot of tools, so if you want to practice using like Beef tool, the pages are written in such a way that it is vulnerable to the beef hooks. Rat proxy, I mentioned Hailstorm earlier, we use it to test that tool, web inspect tool, burp suite tool, to see if the tools can find certain vulnerabilities. Because if they can find them with confidence in this tool, then when we deploy them to the environment, we can have confidence that if the problem exists in the production environment, we should be able to find it too. So, also used for training. One thing you can do is you can take the current copy of Mutillidae and put it on, say, like a Samurai WTF CD, and then you can use Remaster Sys to make your own live CD. Take that into your training class. So you've got all the tools needed to do the training. You've got the vulnerable website. You got it on a DVD that you can boot to, and you can boot your entire training classroom to this environment. When you're done at the end of the day, you just pull the DVD out of the tray, and there's no changes made to the computer. So your technical services group definitely will love that. They don't have to restore the computers back. It's used at some universities. I believe one in Germany is using it in their program. University of Louisville here locally uses the tool to train their graduate students at Speed School. And mentioned earlier, it's used to evaluate web app scanners. Of course, we use it in demos like today, capture the flag, and just to have fun. So where can you get it? Well, one of the easiest ways to do it is to find these pre-installed installations. There's Samurai, has it already pre-installed, and that platform was just recently upgraded to 2.0 a few months back. The nice thing about Samurai is it comes as a bootable DVD, but you can install it if you want. Also, it has a very large selection of web pen testing tools pre-installed onto the Linux, along with, I believe, about 4 different vulnerable applications. One of the applications is this one. There's also DVWA and a couple of other really good ones. The Samurai can be remastered, like I said, and reburned back to a DVD. So a lot of flexibility there. Most of the work's already done for you, which is the nice thing about it. Also, Rapid7 released Metasploitable 2 not too long ago, and when they did, they released a few different vulnerable web applications onto their vulnerable Linux distribution. Metasploitable 2 is a lot more than just a web pen testing target. It actually has a lot of vulnerable services, FTP that has some problems, SSH that has some problems, but it includes the web items as well. And then Owasp Broken Web Apps project, I believe they started incorporating Mutillidae about a year ago when it went to version 2.1, and they have kept up very, very closely. Usually a couple of days after I put a release out, they've already updated their tool. I think the Owasp Broken Web Apps might be the biggest single collection of vulnerable web applications on a single distribution. I'm not sure about that, but they sure have a lot of them, so it's nice to get. To install it, if you want to install it, you can install it on your Windows, XP, 7. I've tested basically XP from SP0 to SP3. It all works fine. Windows 7 works fine. I haven't tried Windows 8 yet. It works on Ubuntu, Debian. It works on Backtrack if you really wanted to make it work on that. And of course, obviously it works on Samurai because it comes pre-installed with that. So how do you install it? Well, if you download Samurai, you don't really install it. It's already installed. You can either put the newest version additionally onto Samurai so that you have the copy that comes with it plus the new version, or you can simply replace the existing version. It's up to you. There's 2 YouTube videos for each of those respective techniques at these links, which I'll have all these links at the end of the presentation, the last slide, and the presentation will be given out. So these videos explain how to replace the existing version or upgrade. On Windows, you first install XAMPP is my preference, or someone else said they like to use the WAMP tool. Either way, you're installing a program that's going to put the MySQL server, the Apache server, the PHP server all onto your computer automatically. Then in the htdocs folder of that respective setup, you just take the Mutillidae folder and drop it in. Literally just copy and paste it in there. Hit that reset database button that we talked about earlier, and you should be up and running. And it should be noted that some versions of Windows, some versions of PHP, depending on which one you get, there may be some errors. If you actually just open up Mutillidae, the home page has a link that says how to get rid of these PHP errors. Click on it, and it'll give you some instructions on modifying the php.ini file. I believe I forgot to mention earlier in the last slide, if you want to do the download, it's at SourceForge. You don't really need to memorize the link. If you just type the title of the project in, it'll come right up. Or you can Google it. So on the setup, after you install the files, you hit that Reset DB button, and you're off and running. How to use the tool? Well, instead of explaining it, even though we're going to do a few demos, it's probably better to go check out the YouTube channel for the tool, because there's probably around, I'm going to say 50 videos for web pen testing. Some of the videos are instructional on how to set the environment up on different distributions, different types of operating systems. But most of the videos are on some type of vulnerability. So there might be a couple of videos on HTML5 web storage. There's going to be some videos on cross-site scripting, different kinds of SQL injection. Big topics like SQL injection, there's probably multiple videos. One that maybe shows how to do the selection of data out of the system. Others might cover how to inject new files onto a web server, add your own web page to the web server type of thing. And there's about 30 to 35 other videos on the channel, and those cover pen testing, but not necessarily web. They may be more about network services. They may be more about man-in-the-middle attacks, those kind of things. Again, if you, in this case, you would Google my username that's up there instead of Googling the project name. I'll have more on that at the end. When you get into the system, there's a menu on the left. It's kind of where everything flows from. So you click on the top 10. It's going to pull up basically the top 10 here, categories. And then within each of those categories is going to be a list of, I guess you call them vulnerabilities. So in this slide, the A1 other injection menu item has been selected, and then there's a dozen or so other kinds of injection besides SQL injection that you can choose from. You select which one you want, and it'll give you a list of the pages that exhibit that vulnerability, or at least we know for sure exhibit that vulnerability. It is possible the pages have vulnerabilities that are not documented. So a pretty easy menu system. The only one that's broken out twice is A1 because there's a dozen different kinds of SQL injection, and then there's a dozen different kinds of other injections, and it wouldn't fit in one menu pane if we didn't break that up a little bit. Besides the hints and the bubble hints and all the other help that we talked about, there's a file inside of the documentation folder that comes with the project when you download it that has a list of all the tests that we've done on the system over time, and when they work, we just stick them into this file and just keep appending to this file, and it grows over time. So I checked it yesterday, and I think it has about 1,100 lines of different kinds of exploits in it that you can cut and paste and try out on different pages. For the most part, I've been pretty good about putting the page that it'll work on and some explanation of what the exploit's trying to do. Okay. So to get updates, there are frequent updates that come in, I guess you'd call bursts, because I'll get a little bit of time and there'll be a whole bunch of updates, and then I won't get a lot of time and be silent for 3 months. So it's kind of the nature of the beast right now. What happens is I'll post the changes to SourceForge, obviously, and then I also post them to the SVN on SourceForge. So if you want to use that type of download, you can do that instead. Then after that seems to work okay and everything, I'll go ahead and tweet out the link to the new version, and usually a very short explanation about what's different. Usually just try to change one thing at a time, because again, don't have much time to work on the project in any long stretch. If we put a new video out on the video channel, then that'll also get tweeted to the exact same channel. So if you're watching that Twitter account, that's the one where everything's going to be posted out to. I believe in YouTube you can also subscribe to the channel, and it'll automatically email you when something's posted to that channel as well. So these are all the links that were referred to somewhere in the presentation, and these references will be posted on the ISSA Kentuckiana website. If we don't get the entire presentation up, we'll at least get these links up. Alright, so I thought I'd use the rest of the time to do some demos. So the environment I'm going to use is VirtualBox, and I have a couple of virtual machines running. I've got Windows XP box, which has Mutillidae installed on it, and then we've also got somewhere in here there's a Backtrack 5 running on it as well. Let's see if these machines are up. Okay, go ahead and get logged into Backtrack and get it running. Okay, get logged into Windows. So in this case, I'm using Windows XP SP3, and the installation of choice is the XAMPP method. So I downloaded XAMPP and installed it. It's just got an executable installer. You just follow the steps. So in this case, I've installed to C XAMPP is where I dumped the XAMPP installation. It seems to be the easiest thing to do. And then it comes with an htdocs folder that's already going to be in that XAMPP directory wherever you put it. And I literally just took the zip file off of SourceForge, unzipped it, which had the Mutillidae folder inside, and I just pasted the Mutillidae folder right into the htdocs folder. And that's the installation. These other projects, I guess you'd say, they come with XAMPP, so these websites are already there when you install it. Go ahead and start with web browser and do some demos. Okay, so here's the toggle hints. Go to security. Let's pick a page here. We'll just go to category A1. Sql Injection has a data extraction practice page called user info. Your job is to get the info out. So here's the bubble hint as we hover over the boxes. If we hit toggle hints, the level 1 hints open up. And if you hit it again, go into level 2. Let me resize this real quick. Okay. And then in level 2, It basically has a little more tutorial style, step 1, step 2, and so on. There's the view capture data, the hide pop-up hints if they get annoying, which they do sometimes, and the enforce SSL. So, all right, so I thought we'd do some demos to check out some of the vulnerabilities. I'll do a couple of quick ones, then do Sql injection because that seems to be a fan favorite, and then I'll do some stuff that maybe you haven't seen before. So do the robots.txt, that's a pretty easy one. All you do is, in this case, is type in robots.txt. Some websites have this problem where they don't want the browsers to crawl certain folders, but instead of using access control, they just tell the browser, don't crawl this folder. So if you look inside of that file, you may see some folders, like say in this case passwords, that they're trying to keep Google and stuff out of, but they're also sort of telling everybody, hey, I'm interested in keeping you away from this. So it may not be the best idea. There's a second vulnerability on this system called directory browsing. So if we were to type in passwords, directory, unfortunately directory browsing is enabled. So now this secondary vulnerability has led to accounts, and then I guess you know the rest. Click on that, you get some accounts. Those aren't real. I just put them in there to give you a target, but get the idea. There's actually a whole lot of accounts preloaded into the system. So insecure direct object reference is another vulnerability that's put into the system. This is pretty common on some older websites that used to have basically like a frame, such as this blue frame here, and then they would show the page in the center, and the page they would show would be whatever was passed in as the parameter. But the site might literally pass in the object's name. So for example, if they want to pass in a PHP file to show, they would literally pass in the name and the path of the PHP file. It's an insecure direct object reference. You're directly referencing the valuable resource. So you could simply tell the page to go reference some other objects. So in this case, we might say like, well, go up some number of directories and try to get some system files. This is Windows XP, so maybe we try to get a boot.ini. And you can see it's starting to read the system files and display those onto the screen. And this is real, so if you deploy this, remember again, do not put this anywhere where people can get to it.
How do they increase the security level on the page to where it would stop?
This toggle security button here?
I mean in the actual code.
Oh, in the actual, you mean how do you fix this particular problem?
Right.
I see. Yeah, so what you would do, this is insecure direct object reference, so you use tokenization. So you represent your resources with a map. So maybe we just use an integer. So maybe we say like, if I want to get to this PDF, it's number 1. And if I want to get to that Excel document, that's number 2. And so you would pass in right here, you would pass in, say, the number 2, and it would get the resource. When the number 2 is passed in, you just simply validate, is it an integer first of all, and is it an integer between X and Y? And if it is an integer and it's between X and Y, then you go to your map and you translate the number 2.
You couldn't go anywhere else.
Right, there's no other possible place you can get to.
So if you're setting the variable to say read in param page, and give me the value of that param being page, and comes back with a number and you validate it against what have you.
Right. Typically, I use integers for most situations because, 1, most situations are simple, and 2, integers are easy to validate. They're also relatively, on modern languages, they're relatively difficult to overflow. I mean, you can type in a really big integer, but most of the platforms will handle it, even if you do type in a really big one. And then your check ought to be checking to make sure that the range is valid anyway. So if you have, I don't know, 50 documents to offer, you ought to be checking the numbers between 1 and 50, or whatever you set up your range as. You don't just let them type in an arbitrarily large integer, because they might try to overflow the container that's holding the integer.
The actual way the page is set up is not, is it in a blob, so to speak, in the database, or are these actual files?
No, these are actual files. This is a real site. And so if you want to go in, or if you want to have your students or whatever go in and change the code, if you want to have them go in and fix the code, that's fine. It's actual PHP code. Now, of course, you could kind of cheat by looking at the security level 5 code, which is going to be more advanced security. and you can kind of see how it defends itself. The way these security levels work is there's nothing really magical going on. It's just a simple case statement. If the security level is 0, it runs one set of PHP. If it's 1, it runs another set. And if it's 5, it runs a third different. It just runs different code, literally a different page. So. Right. Any other questions on the insecure direct object reference? So another quick demo we can do is caching. And so to do that, you just do nothing more than type in about cache. So you can try to figure out if the site is caching information. In this case, cache is disabled, yay. So that's because in the tools options, I've probably got the caching disabled, so it won't work. But the site's not defending itself in security level 0. However, if you switch it to level 5, you'll notice that the HTTP response headers all contain cache control in them. And then you switch it back to 0, and it doesn't contain cache control anymore. So you can go into about cache and look around, see what is caching the disk. All right, go ahead and do a quick Sql injection demo. Make sure I save time at the end for this command injection. So on level 0 earlier in the presentation was off. We type in a control character like a single quote. We start to get way too much information about the system and the state of the error and the internal state of the system and the actual query that failed. And while this error message here is absolutely ridiculous, there's no question. It's actually fairly common too. So as ridiculous as it is, a lot of sites do this. So once you get the query, it's kind of game over from there. There is a little bit of work we're going to have to do because we don't know how many columns there are in the table accounts. We actually do know the table name, and we don't know where a username and password would be output onto this page. So we can start to pick away at that pretty quickly. So if we do like a union statement and then a select, and then we'll just say like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll put in the old faithful comment character. Okay, so now we get a different error message. This is a good error message. It's a happy error message if you're a pen tester. So you're getting the select statement has a different number of columns. So now we know that the database actually did some work. That's good news for pen tester, bad news for websites. You don't want your user to be able to tell your database to do stuff. Okay, so we'll just add a column on. Since we didn't have the right number of columns, it worked. The reason I sent in integers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, was so that when the numbers pop back out the other side, I know which columns are being selected in which positions in the SQL statement written by the developer, if that makes sense. So I can map the columns. So in other words, I wouldn't want to pick on the first column because it's not displayed on the page. So what would be the point? Okay, we'll just keep going. Actually, I'm going to turn these. Like I said, these pop-up pins get annoying. So I regret putting them in there. So maybe here we can type in the version command, which I believe works in MySQL. It might work in Oracle too, I'm not sure. I always have trouble with Oracle because they have a lot of commands. Hey, cool, there we go. So it's version 5.525A. And of course it's going to go downhill from here. So we'll start to pick on the information schema. Okay, so that you can see all this junk that I'm typing. Let's go back and look at the notes. Okay, so there's the version. And then we're going to start to pick on the information schema table because it contains a list of all the tables and columns in the system. And as you can see, we're slowly just picking away at the layers of the database, trying to get more and more information out of it so we can get at what our target would be, which would be in the data. All right, so we asked for a list of all the tables in the database, and we've got those now. If we go down to our database, which is Owasp 10, you can see there's an accounts table, there's a hit log, credit cards, so on. Of course, it's not real. data, but get the idea. And then now we can start picking on individual tables. I realize we're going a little fast, but when you're the presenter before lunch, you don't mess around. So. I'm going to change from information schema and tables to accounts. I think it was, schema was Owasp 10, and the table name was accounts. Copy this in case I don't get it right. To a cheat. Okay, so select username and password from table accounts. And there's the way to one way to dump the passwords out of the system. Like I said, that robot stat text thing we did earlier wasn't the real passwords table. It's just a canary to give you something to practice. But these are the actual real usernames and passwords in the system. If you go up here to log in, they'll work. All right, so that's Sql Injection Demo in a nutshell. And you can use Sql Injection to do other things too. This is kind of the common case where you're selecting data out. What we might do is, instead of asking to get data out of the database, maybe we're just using the database itself as a conduit to pass commands through the database into the operating system. Or maybe we'll want to use the database as almost like a command shell to run commands like load file and stuff like that. So we can try this injection, which basically does a load file. So we can go down into the system files and read out, this. In this case, it's the host file. So it contains the Windows host file. By the same token, we can use insert injection to insert new web pages into the website and then browse to those web pages. Maybe we would inject, for example, a command shell, web-based command shell. Add that page to the site as a brand new page and then just browse to the page and you got your shell running. Demos of that are online on the Weaponized channel. Alright, and for the more realistic demo, actually, unfortunately, this Sql injection stuff is somewhat realistic. It's less common nowadays, thank goodness, but for some reason it's still hard to get people to use stored procedures when they write their code. I'm not saying it's a good reason. You're going to write the query anyway. You might as well jam it into a procedure while you're in there. But it's hard to get people to do it. Alright, so this page here, DNS Lookup, implements command injection. And this attack, it basically works on the idea that you're passing in some information, perhaps a IP address in this case, and the tool is going to pass that information on to the operating system, who's going to run a command against the data. In this case, it's NSLOOKUP against an IP address. And then it's going to return the results of that operating system command back to the website, which is going to format it and display the results on the page. So we're not connected to DNS or any networks. So NSLOOKUP says, I don't know, and returns back the normal text. But what happens if you start chaining commands together? So what if you say, well, okay, operating system, do the command that you were going to do, but then also, while you're at it, do this other thing for me as well. So we can use the and symbol in Windows, for example, and say the dir command. Again, this is operating specific and this is real, so you have to take into account the OS you deployed on. And so you can run the dir command. It finished the NSLOOKUP command just fine, and then it read our command, the chain command, and then executed that. So you can kind of see where this is going. And it's not good. So we're going to try to take over this Windows box. Alright, and let's try to do it from backtrack. If it doesn't work, I'll switch back over.
Seems like this would be a good tool to demonstrate the management. But they're all, I mean, you can almost do a live demo with some fake data, put some of your type of data in your company and just show it.
Right.
Okay, here's what the customer can get to, or here's what a hacker can get to.
I think that's a great idea. If you can actually get management, or perhaps maybe even development team management, maybe it doesn't have to be like upper management per se. But if you're just trying to make sure everybody understands it's a real problem.
Yeah, especially at smaller companies.
Well, that's true.
That's what
Yeah, that'd be a good use case as well. We've been using it over a few years just to demonstrate problems directly to web developers, just so that for one, they understand it's real. Like it's not just something made up, or the press is not just hyping something or exaggerating something, but these are actual problems. But the second thing is to demonstrate design patterns in your code that lead to problems. So if you're not tokenizing, stuff, you're going to run the problem with direct object references. If you're not using procedures or least parameterized queries, you might end up having problems. So.
Hey, Jeremy. I was kind of, since I sit by you a lot of times, I was kind of surprised on how quickly you can take a site that you've never seen and become the administrator of that site.
Practice.
And this is some real, this is a commercial software that we're, talking about evaluating that really isn't secure.
Yeah, the reason is that over time you start to see that there's patterns in the software and the code that is going to have a problem. It's not necessarily exactly what the developer typed or the language they used or the platform they deployed on. It's how they did it. So for examples, it doesn't really matter what platform you're on, ASP.NET, PHP, Java, whatever. It really makes no difference. It doesn't really matter what your system does. If your application is passing raw queries from itself across the network and giving them to the database and asking the database to run those queries at runtime, you could be in trouble. Because computers do what computers do. If it's valid SQL, and I can add a little bit of extra SQL onto your SQL, and we just pass all of our stuff across the wire together, the database is going to execute it. So, on the other hand, if I see a design pattern in a site, like, for example, the developer has not given the website any privileges to any table at all, the website is totally blind, it can't even see the tables, it can't even see that the tables exist. They've built a bunch of stored procedures and put those in an isolated schema and only given the web application rights to execute just those procedures and just that schema. I know I'm going to have a long day because the chances of me getting any code to execute are really, really small. We'll still test it, but it's unlikely anything bad is going to happen. So it's all about the patterns and practicing a whole lot. And then you kind of, when you walk up to a brand new site you've never seen, you can almost kind of tell like if there might be a weakness. So I'm going to start to chain together some commands that are going to start telling us some things about the Windows system. This is a lot like the Sql injection. You don't know a lot to start with. You find a vulnerability, you just write some exploits to kind of start peeling away the layers of the system and figure out how it works. In this case, let's take a look and see if we can figure out if Telnet's running. So at least we know the Telnet service is on the box, but it's stopped. So we're not going to be able to Telnet in very well. That's a good idea. Let's try that. Okay, so first thing we want to do, this is Windows. Let's notice that the Telnet server is called TLNTSVR. We got that piece of reconnaissance out of the way. I guess scanning is a better word for it. I think it's start and then the name of the service. So it's a good idea, but they've got this box hardened a little bit. The service has been disabled. Okay. So why don't we take this command. So we'll do an scconfig. So we're going to configure the service. Name of the service, Telnet server. And we're going to say the start is demand. Manual is the translation if you're looking in the GUI version instead of the command line version. Alright, that worked. And then let's go back to that previous idea, which was to start the service. Now that we've got it configured. Took a minute.
Once you could chain that command, was it pretty much over then, or what else could they have done?
There's two major flaws with
Because
this
they had
web.
that disabled and everything, and you're still, now you're going back in, reconfiguring and start.
Yeah, there's two major flaws with this particular web page. The first flaw is that even though they're passing in a relatively simple thing to validate, an IP address, they don't do any validation. But there's a much bigger problem with this site than that. Somebody might see what it is.
Actually passes it directly to the command line.
Pass it directly to command line, which could be okay if something was configured different.
Authentication to the website.
What's that?
Authentication credentials to the website is not Windows authentication credentials.
Right.
If it's anonymous, you can't do that.
So what? It gets back to privileges. It's privileges. That's the problem.
This website just shouldn't have the privilege to do that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, why would a website want to be able to run the SC command at all, right? And while we're at it, why would a website want to be able to run a net command? So let's do net user. So we'll say root tour, username, and password, and we'll use the add flag. So now we've got a user on the system. All right, and then we'll say net local group administrators tour. Oops. Tell you what, let me copy it from here. So now we're going to add our user into the administrators group just for fun. Everybody wants to be admin, right? Just ask your users. Okay. Now if we do a net local group, so same command, net local group, and then we name the group telnet clients, we can actually get over another hurdle that we're going to have right now, which is you can't telnet into the Windows box unless you're in the telnet clients group, and this box has been hardened, so the telnet's client group was deleted, so we're just going to have to put that back. So we're going to add the telnet clients group to the Windows system, and then we're going to add our user to the telnet clients group. Okay. So to give kind of a peek behind the curtain, let's just go look how Windows is doing at this point. You wouldn't normally be able to do this in a test, but that's okay.
You just gave yourself admin rights now.
Yeah, that's true. So there's the root user root that we added. There's the telnet clients group that we added. And we'll have to try to get ourselves put into that group. And then here's the administrators. And looks like we didn't do that command right either. So we kind of know where we're at so far. Alright, speed things along. Just copy, paste. I think earlier I might have typed Tor instead of root. For some reason I just remember myself doing it.
Yeah, I wonder what Tor was.
Thanks.
It's backtracks.
Yeah, sorry. It's like I'm thinking one thing, but my fingers automatically type something else. Oh, telnet clients, sorry. Let's do telnet clients. Okay, we're still going to have a problem. Got 7 minutes. We can do it. This shouldn't work, but that's what I want. I want to kind of like work through the problems. Connection refused, so what's the problem? Firewalls. Alright. Let me blow this up so you can see it. So what we'll do now is we'll do the we'll use NetShell firewall, and we'll add a TCP port 23 opening into the firewall. And just to be careful, we're going to do it just for our IP address. So I've already got that long command typed out here. And then RIP would go right here. We know what RIP is, or we can figure it out. Okay, it's 102. Good to know. Over here. Should get an OK back. There's our OK. So we got connection refused.
Are you going? You're not really looking through that interface.
Yeah, thank you. Again,
You're very
yeah. I'm typing in what we would type in on Windows. We're not on Windows anymore. I've left. I've gone to another OS. So it's probably 101. We use an nmap scan to figure that out. So let's just say we did it. It was 101. I'm going to assume it's 101. Let's see. No route to host.
Pinging is not the same as being broadcast.
Just a quick sanity check, and let's see. Hey, well, why not up here? Let's see. Let's see, IP config. Oh, ha. There's our problem. We've diagnosed it. Thanks to command injection. Oh, you think that's? If you think that's kind of funny, check this out.
The help string.
I've done this before in a pen test. Kid you not. Choose the help. Right? That's what it's there for. Right. So that works pretty good. Oh, sorry, it's the wrong computer. And we got telnet through a firewall on a disabled service. So, to your point, it is a good demonstration tool to show how powerful some of these vulnerabilities on some of these simple functions can be. All right, so we got a few minutes here left, and take any questions. Yes.
So, you mentioned not using stored procedures and only using stored procedures, but for efficiency, your cursor returns are actually going to be faster. So, would you still just want to disable your access for like system tables and stuff like that? You just use a dedicated user as opposed to
your DBA is going to be able to show you how to write that exact same functionality that you're achieving with whatever you're doing with that cursor in a different way to be able to achieve your objective. And your performance is actually going to go up quite a bit.
But when you return that large record set, when you go through, I guess you can still change the cursor through the
Yes. You can also use the cursor in the store procedure to go ahead and do the business logic if you want. Not all shops want that. They don't want to necessarily put their business logic in the procedures. And I understand that. You want to decouple the database from the business logic. You want to keep those separate. But there are multiple ways to solve the problem. And your performance will actually go up quite a bit with procedures. So it solves two problems. One is the security issue, but two is queries passed along the wire typically run really poor. So in most cases, you can index them to help, but they're not going to be as fast as a procedure that's already precompiled on the database.
What about injecting a percent into the web page?
So if you're injecting a percent, you'd be going for command injection, or?
Well, it's just the fact of select all, where it said select all from.
Sure.
You can say give me all of the fact. Don't say.
Yeah, you can inject the percent if, so you're talking about SQL injection, and you can inject the percent in that context. You just need to use the like instead of equals. We were using equals, so we would want to say like. But any SQL query is perfectly valid, so use whatever query you see fit, or just use system commands if you want to. So, SQL Server has the hostname command, and Oracle has different commands and different metadata tables that you can access, and different functions that are available, and like the sys libraries that you can use in the util libraries, so you can take advantage of those and run commands as well. You don't have to just run queries. You're basically, you're a user on the database via the website. Whatever authority that website has is what authority you have as a user, which is a really good reason to not give your websites any authority.
People target the DNS lookup sites for this particular purpose.
I'm sure they do.
As you know, like it's server something like this.
I'm sure they do target any kind of, not just DNS lookup, but any kind of shell command site that's been exposed to the internet. I'm sure the developers of the site hopefully have taken into account that they're going to get abused. So they need to either do tokenization of some kind to do a translation at lookup time, or they can do validation if the input is simple enough and can be validated. You know, like you can't really validate, say, like comment fields very easily, right? Because you can type in so much legitimate stuff. If either one of those work, bottom line is you got to make absolutely sure that the user that's actually running the command for you only has permission to do exactly that one task that you've assigned to them. That ultimately it comes back to design almost every time. It's really not about writing more code. It's about setting up things smarter. All right. Well, thanks very much. I'll put the Twitter back up. All roads lead to the Twitter account because it's just easy and cheap. So, if you wanted, it's down there at the bottom. Thanks. You're welcome. What's that? I've got Zap on there too. It was on the left. I just had to start.
Yeah. Okay.
My range against
the prior presentation shows how to get
I have the paid version of it.
we can figure one and two.
Okay, but you have a presentation.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm supposed to ask that.
Yeah, exactly.
He said he's going to make it
your
together.
advantage if you need help. The guy who writes that.
Oh, okay.
He owns it. Simon Bennett's works. We hired him. So we pay him like $4 on Zap.
Oh, okay. We all got like the inside track.
Yeah, well, we had him add a bunch of new stuff. Like pipe
Sending out links page.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Nice talk.
All right, thanks.
Appreciate it. Hey, Jeremy.
Yes. How you doing?
Where can we find this PowerPoint? Are you going to post it someplace?
They're going to put it on the ISSA Kentuckiana website, not the main national site. The people that are putting this conference on, they are going to post it to the site.
Okay. That's nice. Is there any download page where we can download the tool which you were just demoing?
Yes.
Be on the last page. You have the references page, right?
That's true, yeah, I could just go straight to the others. SourceForge, and you can Google.
And then you can get also at Samurai.
Samurai's on SourceForge as well. So this is the download. Oh, PowerPoint. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, so this is the download for the tool that we were just looking at the website, and this is the download for the pre-installed. Right. So the great thing about the pre-installed is it's already up and running, but you can be guaranteed it's not going to be the most recent version. It's whatever the snapshot was. So you can right in there. Their tool. The nice thing about Samurai is that you can just go out and go to the copy from SourceForge, and you can replace the existing. So if you don't want to go through all the trouble of setting up blank, you can just paste over his copy of Mutillidae. Or what I typically do is I'll rename the default version. And then just paste the new version, and that way I can like go back and forth if I put you, or I can put switch between founded.
So with Samurai, you don't have to have your land.
Well, it's already ready to run. It's a bootable DVD that when you boot to it, fires up Apache and PHP and everything automatically, and automatically runs Mutillidae in the DVD. Now, if you install Samurai, it's a little different because when you install it, basically what it does is it does a check to see if you're running from DVD or if you're installed. If you're running from DVD, it starts the vulnerable websites up.
Otherwise, you have to
Otherwise, you need to manually start them, and all you do is in the host file, there's a host.samurai that you need to rename to overwrite the regular host to or remove it.
Well, the reason I was
All
asking,
that,
I
thank
didn't
you.
know